It was a completely unsettling feeling. All I saw was this wall of clouds stretching all the way down. Instinctively, I started to descend, trying to get below the deck. That's when suddenly it struck me. I'm getting into the danger zone. This is not good.
Aviation Intrigue.
That scenario that we just described is unfortunately way more common than you would think. And that is called visual flight into instrument meteorological conditions, or VFR flight into IMC. This can happen so gradually without the pilot even realizing it. Unfortunately, sometimes until it's too late. Why is this so common? And why do even experienced, even instrument rated pilots fall into the trap of VFR into IMC? Join us as we explore the human elements behind this and explore ways to reduce the accident record.
Picture this scenario. You are a visual or a VFR only pilot, and you're planning on a 200-mile cross-country trip in an airplane that you are very familiar with. The weather forecast is showing scattered cloud layers most of the flight. The good news is both your destination and your origin show clear. So you're telling yourself, this is no biggie. I can fly above these clouds and then descend close when I am near my destination airport. Well, the weather gods had a different plan. As you are 20 miles away from your destination, you suddenly notice that the cloud layer has thickened, and in fact, you can't even see the ground anymore. You were probably too busy flying the airplane that you didn't notice these clouds gradually thickening up. Now you're in a quandary. What do you do? Remember, you are a visual VFR only pilot. You're neither trained nor qualified to fly into clouds or instrument conditions.
So, how does a pilot get into such a situation? Why does it happen so often? Well, it comes down to the human element. We'll talk about two elements here. The first is expectation bias. So, this pilot did what they were supposed to do. They checked the weather before launch, saw that it was pretty good, and had a plan for avoiding the clouds. But when that weather became unforecasted, thicker, higher cloud layers, all of a sudden you have to jump into making perhaps a different decision. So aeronautical decision making also factors into this. If you are expecting the weather to be really good and you plan on completing your mission based on that, anytime something changes, you may not always think about what is the best decision here. You're going to want to keep going. And so with expectation bias, it's really, really important that you keep an eye on changes in the weather conditions as you go along and accept the fact that you may have to make a different decision. And that could be not making your destination or flying somewhere different to stay in the good weather. But unfortunately, based on the human element, we do fall into that trap quite often.
In most cases, perhaps it was your expectation bias that led you into getting into a sticky situation. But that itself is not going to make or break your journey. What gets people in real trouble is making a wrong decision or making a choice that is too late. Have you been in any situation similar to this? Have you ever found yourself above the clouds and not knowing how to get below it? If you're comfortable, please share that in our comments. I'm sure other people would love to hear that.
So we touched on aeronautical decision making. That is the key to making a change that could lead to a good outcome or a bad outcome. You have to make a decision. Do I try to keep pressing on to the destination, or do I look for a safer place to land? This is because you may not realize how bad the situation can get. Here's a challenge. When you're stuck above the clouds and the horizon isn't where it's supposed to be, you can get something called slant cloud illusion, where you think the horizon is at a tilt, but it's not. Or if you're stuck between cloud layers with no visible horizon ahead, nothing above or below you to see, that can cause a lot of spatial disorientation where you are not sure which way is up. And all you have right now are the instruments in your airplane. But it takes training to learn how to do that. It takes training to learn how to fly in the clouds. When we get our VFR pilot certificate, we do get a little bit of training, but usually that doesn't happen in the actual clouds. Instrument pilots, same thing. A lot of them haven't had a lot of actual IMC time, actual time in the clouds. And that can be a problem if they encounter that for the very first time and are dealing with those illusions that are working against them and could possibly lead to loss of control of the airplane. So back to ADM. You're stuck above the clouds or between layers. What do you do next if you don't want to press on? In training, we do talk about a couple of situations that you can do if you do have a problem, but it depends on the decision you make. Would you choose to do an emergency descent through the clouds and enter IMC? Well, how thick are those cloud layers? How soon are you going to break out? How low are you going to be? Have you been trained to do this? There are emergency procedures for VFR pilots, but if you haven't done it before, maybe this is not a good time to try it for real by yourself in the airplane. The best thing that we do for training in terms of escaping IMC or avoiding entering it is to do a U-turn, go back the way you came from, and hopefully the weather is just as good as before you enter it. But that's not always a guaranteed solution either. The weather could have closed in behind you. So what do you do next? The bottom line is preventing problems early, maybe even before you leave the ground. That's where ADM can kick in during your pre-flight planning. If it doesn't look good, maybe you'll postpone the flight or wait for another day. If you're in flight and you have unforecasted weather, and that does happen all the time, let ADM work for you rather than against you. Good ADM could mean that you may not make your destination, and back on the ground, you can plan for that. Planning alternates for fuel, alternates for weather, having that plan B and a really, really good plan B that is just about guaranteed to get you out of trouble can be the best way to plan a trip rather than letting expectation bias take over.
If you're enjoying this discussion, please make sure to subscribe and follow our channel and hit those like and share buttons. And most importantly, add your thoughts in the comments.
So it's a really common scenario. Imagine you're on a long VFR cross country, a few hundred miles. The cloud forecast says it's going to be pretty good ceilings, 4,000 feet, and you decide if you can fly at 3,500 feet, you can maintain the required cloud clearance and get to the destination safely. But halfway through the flight, you notice that the cloud ceiling that you're following 500 feet below is getting lower and lower. Suddenly you're at 3,000 feet trying to maintain your cloud clearance, but the clouds keep getting lower, 2,500 feet. 2,000 feet. What do you do then? Here are the options. You can let expectation bias take over and say, well, the ceiling should go back up closer to the destination. I'll continue going. Another option is to find a place to land, get on the ground, check the weather, and maybe cancel the rest of the flight. But you're low enough already, so you have to make a couple of decisions. Can you make a destination, check the weather, and make a safe landing there? That's ADM kicking in as well. What decisions are you going to make for the nearest airport? Maybe you have to actually change your flight path and go to a completely different heading to find another airport. Okay, do you have the fuel to do that? Another decision kicks in. So something that started with expectation bias can lead to many decisions having to be made under a stressful situation. We talked about this very type of scenario causing a lot of accidents. Sometimes the decisions aren't the best and the pilot chooses to continue going into lower and lower clouds. Now we know about that term. It's called scud running. When you are flying very low below the cloud bases, very low to the ground, possibly with terrain or obstacles ahead, and yet you continue to fly lower and lower. Yet another decision could kick in. Do you land off field? Do you make an emergency landing? Unfortunately, sometimes the decision is to yet continue to keep going until there's either a loss of control in the clouds or an impact with the ground. If you've never actually experienced being in the clouds, and some of you who are instrument rating also may not have, it is a great idea to get some actual training with an instructor who can file an IFR flight plan, get a clearance, and have you fly in the clouds to experience your level of spatial disorientation, because everybody does react differently to that, and also experience what it's like to lose all visual cues and train yourself on how to control the airplane by use of instruments. Unless you've experienced solid IMC before, it can be tough to tell how your body is going to react to the spatial illusions that are out there and the level of your spatial disorientation. It can be a lot like driving through dense fog, where the loss of visual cues can be very, very disorienting.
Year after year, accident statistics in aviation show that visual only VFR pilots flying into the clouds or IMC is the leading cause of incidents and accidents. How do you avoid it? It has to do with pre flight planning, good decision making, and being completely vigilant to your surroundings. Especially if you're a visual only pilot, you need to be extra vigilant. Although even instrument rated and experienced pilots need to know, are the conditions doing exactly what you thought they were forecast to be. Chances are it's not. You need to react to it. So it all comes down to the human element and making the right choice. Although making the right choice is important, making the right choice at the timely manner is even more important because the more you delay, the less options you have that you can execute later on.
Have you ever been in a situation where you were on a cross country flight and the clouds kept lower and lower? Share your stories. What did you end up doing? And your experiences could help others. So we all know that thunderstorms are a huge hazard in cross-country flying. It is even worse when you have VFR into IMC and embedded thunderstorms that you can't see ahead in terms of creating a huge hazard for all pilots. Like any thunderstorm, except the ones that you can't see, they are very hard to forecast and very hard to track in terms of trends, in terms of size, direction of flight, and severity. And so when they're embedded, when they're hiding inside thick layers of clouds and solid IMC, it can be very, very difficult. And avoidance is absolutely key to safety for any pilot, whether visual or instrument. So we talked about spatial disorientation and the fact that it is awfully easy to lose control of the aircraft if you don't have a visual horizon or you're stuck between layers or have entered IMC inadvertently. If you add in the danger of embedded thunderstorms to that, it can be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to control the airplane. So thunderstorms, you can see them or not, can be dangerous even many miles away from them. And that's another danger with not seeing them in the clouds. So severe updrafts, downdrafts, severe turbulence can affect the structural integrity of the aircraft, exceeding speed limitations, structural limitations, and unfortunately, the accident record does contain accidents where loss of control near or in thunderstorms has led to structural failures.
Well, we're not really sure what you would do in this situation, but we know what we would do. If there's thunderstorms or a chance of convection in the area, we are probably going to avoid that area or maybe fly another day. It all comes down to the human element. It's about expectation bias, making proper and timely aeronautical decisions. Do you agree with us? Disagree with us? Do join us in the comment section and share your thoughts.
This show is for entertainment purposes only and is not to be taken as flight advice, flight instruction, or a replacement for flight training or decision making. Please consult with a certified flight instructor for more.
Aviation Intrigue.